what I want to talk about today is how to be a real life superhero. Now, Jeff, this is going to come as a shock to you, but when I was a kid, I wanted to be a superhero.
What?
I know that's difficult to believe, but and I partly blame my parents because one Halloween they dressed me up in a Superman costume, and then I was hooked for life. I used to rush back from school to see Superman on TV, the 1950s George Reeves. And there was a Spider-Man cartoon then from the 1960s. And I would watch these things and take it in. And I thought, oh, it would be so cool to be a superhero. And then as I was growing up, I went to church and I would read these stories about and hear these stories about Jesus and how he was healing the sick and feeding the hungry. And I thought, oh, that would be so cool to be able to do those things for humanity. But I had this idea. And then in our research, the strangest thing and most amazing, wonderful thing happened is that God has already provided the answer to how people can rise above who they are and become something extraordinary. Now, of course, the main reason to read the Bible, the main reason is, of course, eternal life and salvation, how our sins can be forgiven, and how we can be redeemed. That would be the main reason. But what's extraordinary is what we found is that there's actually numerical codes that are in the Bible. And we have found in our labs these same numerical codes in living systems. And the implications to this are really extraordinary. Our application, which we'll be talking about at our conference in October, is how we can use this information to increase human lifespan and become younger and healthier in the process. That's a small excerpt from a presentation that I did in Florida not too long ago. And this is one of the many, many benefits when you come to live events, because we're able to have more time and cover more information than we can on calls like this or through other means. So it's so great to come to live events, be part of the community, and of course, use that as an experience to improve your personal life and also to grow your business. But this is just a small part of a presentation that I did over a period of 3 hours. And what I want to talk about are these numerical codes that are in the Bible, just for a minute. And for the purpose of this information, I'm not trying to persuade you to be a Christian or any other faith. This is simply a matter of science, the fact that this numerical information is there. My personal belief is that the Bible is the inspired word of God. But what matters in this context is what this information can mean to you, how you can use this to improve your life in potentially a really dramatic way. So let's look at it from that perspective. So first, we're going to go to the Old Testament, and this would be Genesis chapter 2, verse 16 and 17. And we find that in the Garden of Eden, that there is the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and also the tree of life. So Genesis 3 said, and the Lord God said, behold, the man has become as one of us. This is after Adam and Eve ate of the fruit of the tree of knowledge. Now, lest he put forth his hand and take also of the tree of life and eat and live forever. So there's some information here that we can gather. So if we just put aside any of our beliefs, if we were to assume that the Bible is indeed the inspired word of God, then what we would gather from this is that originally human beings were designed to be immortal. Never be sick, never age. When Adam and Eve fell from grace, then their lifespan was limited to about 1,000 years. And we have, of course, evidence of that in the Bible as well through these stories. After the fall of mankind again, with the great flood, God says, okay, well, now I'm going to limit your lifespan again. Let's say it's to 120 years. So what can we learn from this? What I've been doing is looking at the book of Genesis in the original Hebrew, and then using a process known or something known as gematria, converting Hebrew over into numbers. So both Hebrew and Greek, those letters and words can be converted over into numerical values. And there's a history behind this that we won't get into today. But what I wanted to focus in on was literally this phrase, tree of life. I'd have thought, well, maybe the answer to stopping aging could literally be found in this story about the tree of life. So we know that when Adam had a son, he was at 130 years of age. Adam died at the age of 930. And this, of course, is after the fall. So in Gematria, so here is the Hebrew alphabet, and you can see that each character, each letter is associated with a number. So it's a very simple process. You can do this with an online calculator of converting a word or a phrase over into a numerical value. So in this particular case, what we want to do is go back and look at literally this phrase, tree of life. That's I used an online converter, and this is what it came out with in Hebrew. Use a calculator again online, or you can do this manually, and you see that this phrase, tree of life, is equivalent to the number 159. Now, what I did here was to assume that that number of 159 was a frequency. Now, there is a very simple way of converting frequency over into wavelength. Essentially, what you do is you take the speed of light, divide it by frequency, and then you get your wave number. And depending on whether or not you want your wave number in meters, or in this case, we want to convert this to light, we'd use nanometers. Then we take that number and divide it into a range until we get to our range of visible spectra. Anyway, to make this simple, the frequency 159, which is the numerical number for tree of life, is converted into a wavelength of 857 nanometers. Now, what's extraordinary about that is that 850 nanometers in this range you find in the literature is the exact wavelength that you use to turn on the mitochondria in human cells. This is not a coincidence. There is no way this is a coincidence, and there's no way anybody would convince me it's a coincidence. Now, when you come to our event in October, I'm going to spend a lot more time going through other examples of this in the Holy Bible and how God has already encoded into the Bible these numerical sequences that are found in nature and found in species that are immortal. So the message that I have for you and the incredible news is that God already gave us the instructions on how we could find the answer to longevity and immortality. And this appears in nature, in species that don't age. The two of them match one another mathematically perfectly. Here's just a few references on this. This is a study out of the University of Auckland showing that 850 nanometers, which is in the infrared band of light, led to the greatest increments in cell respiration. So this is talking about the capacity of the mitochondria to produce energy. And the reason this is important is because we know that as human beings age, there is a decrease in the amount of energy that the mitochondria produces. That's number one. Number two, what's been found time and again by researchers all over the world that are looking for ways to improve mitochondrial function. This could be by increasing the compound NAD, it could be through the use of acetyl L-carnitine and lipoic acid, a variety of methods, is that as the mitochondria increases its energy output and becomes more youthful, the genes of the cells change to a more youthful state. So the message here is you turn on the mitochondria, get the energy production up, and the cells in our body start to act like younger, healthier cells. So it's not a huge leap to say that the tree of life contained compounds to turn on energy in the mitochondria that would prevent the cells from degenerating. And we see this in nature already. So it's already happening in certain species. Here's just another quick example of a study that was done on photobiomodulation using 800, 850, and 1064 nanometer light, showing significant stimulation or enhancement of mitochondrial function. Also, improvement in circulation. Here's another study. So here's a great example how we can use this information today to improve your athletic performance. So imagine you're an athlete, or imagine you're someone in your 50s or 60s, and you want to naturally improve your athletic performance. Here's a way of doing it drug-free with light. So the implications to this are really extraordinary. Now, how would we do that? let's use another biblical example for the moment to show that this has already happened in human beings. And we'll go back a few thousand years to the story of Samson. Now, we think of Samson as someone who was the strongest person that ever lived. But another story about Samson that's incredibly compelling from the point of view of biology is that he fought and defeated 1,000 men. You must have had to have an extraordinary amount of stamina to fight and defeat 1,000 people. Again, assuming that we can take this story literally, which I do. The question is this true? And if so, how would it be possible? I have some great news. We have an example of someone that's living today, and there's actually many examples. I'm just going to pick one person who gives us an indication that these types of extraordinary feats of stamina are true, and we know how to replicate it. So we're going to talk about this fellow, Dean Karnazes. And the reason to take a look at him is that what he has achieved in his lifetime is extraordinary. He has a genetic defect that, among other things, has allowed him to run 50 marathons in all 50 states in the United States in 50 days consecutively. I know that's something that I would never hope to be able to do. How did he pull this off? What exactly is going on with him? Well, let's go over to the Wikipedia page, and I want you to take a look at some of his highlights. He was able to run 350 miles in 80 hours without sleep. And he did that back in 2005. He ran a 199-mile relay solo. He also ran a marathon to the South Pole, and on and on. It's been said that he could run 60, 80 miles at a time just during normal exercise without any trouble at all. Back in 2006, we had a gentleman on our staff, Stan Cottrell, who was friends with Dean Karnazes and also was an ultra marathon runner. But what's interesting is that he has been studied, and what was found about his genetic defect is that his body did not produce lactic acid in the muscles. So what would happen is that normally when we exercise, our body is going to reach a point where we're going to shift from aerobic to anaerobic metabolism, and we're going to start to convert food over into energy. And as a result, we're going to get lactic acid that's being produced in the cell. And this acid has an interesting impact on our biology. On the one hand, it's going to introduce fatigue into the muscle, but lactic acid is also a very powerful growth factor. So if you're someone that wants to build muscle, what's been found in studies is that if you introduce lactic acid to muscle tissue, the muscle tissue grows. So this is why it's important that when you're exercising, when you're doing resistance training, that you want that burn. You want that lactic acid because it's going to allow your muscles to repair and grow. But in the case for endurance athletes, lactic acid is the enemy during an event because it will fatigue your muscle and limit your endurance. So here we have a real world example of someone with true superhuman abilities in the area of stamina, and we understand the biological mechanism. And it's as simple as limiting the amount of lactic acid in the muscle. So you may be wondering now, how could we actually do this? How could a person without this genetic effect, if you didn't want to go through gene modification, which I hope you won't, what would you do to gain an ability like this and significantly improve your performance? Another side to this is that we know that cancer cells reproduce anaerobically and they produce lactic acid. So when cancer patients have all of that soreness in their body, it's from lactic acid. So if we could have a way of managing lactic acid, then that would mean this could potentially be a very powerful therapy for people that have cancer. So how would we do that? Well, the good news is you probably already have this in your kitchen today. So baking soda has been found to be a very powerful buffer of lactic acid. Let's take just a quick look at this link. Baking soda is a base, so it's an alkalizing agent that can counteract rising acidity in your bloodstream, and this way correct the negative effects of lactic acid. So in other words, you take baking soda through a specific protocol, which we'll get into, and that baking soda will limit your lactic acid production and significantly improve endurance. So something as simple as baking soda can help your body fight fatigue. So here would be a link that you can look up on exactly if you wanted to try this protocol, how you could use just something as simple as baking soda to improve athletic performance or to use it therapeutically. And again, we scroll down. It's recommended to ingest baking soda a minimum of 60 minutes before exercise in a minimum volume of 500 mils of water. And there's all different variations on this. So I would recommend that if this were something you were really interested in trying, because a dose of 14 to 21 grams of baking soda is a lot. Don't do that the first time out because your body has to adapt to it. It will cause significant intestinal distress. You get all kinds of problems with it. So I would recommend that you read up about this, start slowly, and then find out what works for you. Also, I am not a medical doctor. We are not providing any type of medical advice here. This is for information purposes only. So please consult with your doctor or your healthcare practitioner before you try anything here that we're talking about today. But again, what's exciting about this is that we see that there are examples of human beings like Dean Karnazes that have these superhuman abilities. The information here has a potential impact on our health way beyond physical performance. And this is something very simple, very inexpensive that anyone can afford and anyone can implement. And it goes through a very simple mechanism, control of lactic acid. Well, here's the downside to this is that you have to take a lot of baking soda. You have to plan it out over time. It's simple, it's inexpensive, but it does require some thought and planning. So what else could we do that would allow us to improve athletic performance by managing our blood lactate levels? That might be a different approach with a similar outcome other than sodium bicarbonate. And as probably you all guessed, what we're talking about here is carnosine. Now, first, I do want you to know that when we're talking about limiting blood lactate levels, whether or not it be with carnosine or baking soda, there are some good studies here to support this. Each study kind of comes with its own conclusion, but here's one study where it's saying supplementation with baking soda improves performance in muscular endurance activities. And this, of course, is over a variety of different activities and in single and multi-bout exercise. Here is a study with beta-alanine, which is the precursor to carnosine, and exercise performance. So first thing about this is if this is something that you're interested in, then I'd recommend you look at your diet first to see about how you can optimize this effect. What that means is that if you have a diet that's high in dairy products, in red meat, you may be getting enough beta-alanine in your diet. Carnosine is made from the amino acids beta-alanine and histidine, and beta-alanine is found principally in red meat. It's not found to a great extent in vegetables and fruits. So if you're a vegetarian or a vegan, I would recommend that you supplement with beta-alanine. It's very inexpensive. You could take as little as 500 milligrams to 1,000 milligrams daily. Some people have a little bit of sensitivity to beta-alanine. Some people, you'll get a mild itch from taking it. This is just an improvement in blood flow. Some people may find that it's causes a little bit of discomfort, but that's rare. But start out with, let's say, 500 milligrams and see how you respond. But typically in performance supplements that are on the market, you might find 1,500 milligrams. So the dosing is considerably higher than that. But you need the beta-alanine in order to make carnosine. So when you're seeing beta-alanine being used in studies, this is for one of the purposes would be to increase carnosine. Now we know carnosine is found in the muscle. It's also found in the cardiac tissue, in the heart, and it's also found in the brain. So carnosine is incredibly powerful. If your goal is to improve athletic abilities, the other benefits you're going to get out of this is to support the health of your heart. And carnosine also acts as a nootropic. We did a study showing that use of the carnosine patch for 30 days improved cognition. So carnosine has many, many health benefits. The one, of course, we're focusing on here today is exercise performance. So here is a study where it's looking at the use of beta-alanine as a supplement to improve carnosine, and then use this to improve exercise performance. We'll take a look at another study, prospects of use of functional ingredient for functional food formulation. So I found this interesting, is that in this study, the researchers wanted to look at including beta-alanine or carnosine in a food and using that to improve athletic performance. So people are looking at this from a variety of different ways, but with the same outcome. Now, here was an interesting study that I found that I wanted to share with you. And this one was a paper that was written on the use of beta-alanine supplementation relating to exercise and training. And you can see this came from Ghent University in Belgium. And we'll scroll down here and over back to the abstract. And the reason I wanted to point this out was because this had a very nice disclosure in the abstract of some of the many ways that carnosine can improve overall athletic performance and overall health. So, but generally, as you can see over here, carnosine may attenuate acidosis by acting as a pH buffer. So this is what shows up again, is, in other words, the believed method of action is that you have a high concentration of carnosine in the muscle. So once someone begins to exercise, this will buffer the pH, it buffers the lactic acid, and endurance and strength ultimately end up improving. Here's one that is interesting because rowing is certainly an incredibly difficult sport that involves athletes getting strength training and endurance training. And here was a study that was looking at the use of carnosine and beta-alanine in that role. So it can be concluded that there's a positive correlation between baseline muscle carnosine levels and rowing performance. So here this study was showing that, you take a beta-alanine or carnosine supplement, you increase the amount of carnosine in the muscle, and endurance improves in rowing. Now, what does this have to do with our patch? Well, we've done a number of studies. I wanted to point out two of them. This one goes back to 2011. You can find this study in your back office in our resource section. And you'll see we have our studies listed there. So you just scroll down over to carnosine, and you'll see that in this study, we wanted to look first, did the carnosine patch improve strength and endurance? So is that going to be a benefit that people get? And the results, you can read through the study if you like. The results demonstrate that the carnosine patch increases performance in a flexibility test, and 12 different measures of strength and endurance. So we thank Lisa Tully for having performed that study. So, Jeff, what this means to me is we have so many athletes today that are, unfortunately, they think they have to resort to anabolic steroids or other unsafe performance-enhancing drugs, a way that is natural, whether or not it be through carnosine or sodium bicarbonate, natural, simple ways that they can improve strength and stamina and do it inexpensively and do it safely and do it in harmony with nature. And maybe even like Dean Karnazes, get some superhero-like results. So that would be my message today. Looking back in time in 2005, and David Jumper will remember this because he was actually in our office, and I said, well, David, I have a new patch here. Would you like to try it? And he tried it, and he got an effect right away. And that was actually the glutathione patch. And what had happened was we were at market with Energy Enhancer, LifeWave, Silent Nights. And I started thinking, I wonder if we can use the technology to synthesize peptides. And glutathione was the first one that I tried. And of course, that was successful. And we had just gotten back our blood test, a urine test. And we saw that the patch was doing what it was designed to do. So from that, I thought, okay, well, if it elevates glutathione, what other peptides might we want to look at with this technology? So I began to do some research, and I came across a study that was done on carnosine that really got my attention. And then later on, as we began to set up clinical studies to show what would be the benefits, we started looking at things like exercise performance and cognition.
Very cool. We have several questions that chat kind of related to carnosine in general and the impact on eyesight. Are there any studies around carnosine and eye health?
Are many studies on that. We don't make any claims because carnosine is used medicinally in the form of eye drops. So what I would suggest is that if someone has a serious medical condition concerning their eyes, that they should speak with a healthcare practitioner about using carnosine eye drops. And that has been shown to be safe and effective in treating a number of medical conditions. It's nothing we've studied, so we don't have any idea whether or not carnosine patch would be useful for that application. But certainly, carnosine is found naturally in tears, and glutathione is as well. Glutathione definitely helps support the health and the function of the eyes. But for medical side of it, if I had an issue with my eyes, I would be speaking with my doctor about carnosine drops. I'll put it that way.
Oh, very nice. Okay, so there's some just really basic questions on carnosine around, what's the best time to wear carnosine? What are the best patch placements for carnosine? I'm wondering if you could speak on that for a minute.
This is a really interesting question, because originally when we came out with carnosine, it was intended to be used during the day, and it would pair wonderfully with X39. So as an example, someone could use X39 behind the neck and carnosine below the belly button, and now you have a great combination for supporting strength, stamina, recovery, and overall health and wellness. So it's a very, very powerful combination. Now, as we began to release more patches, people began to experiment with the use of carnosine in the evening. And what some people find is that their dreams become very intense if they wear the carnosine patch at night. My personal experience is that my body is asleep, but my mind feels very awake when I wear the carnosine patch in the evening. So that wouldn't be my first choice. I typically use carnosine during the day. So I think what I would say is some people really like using it at night, and so it can be experimented with that way.
Oh, very good.
Yeah.
So actually it related to that, one individual said, that for them in particular, carnosine makes them sleepy. Is that a known effect of carnosine, or is that something unique?
No, carnosine. Well, I would say that what we have found, pretty consistent with our patches, is that they generally tend to produce a relaxation response in the nervous system. And we have seen that especially with Eon. So if someone was looking to reduce stress, Eon would be the go-to. But I would say that carnosine, the use of the carnosine patch, does tend to produce relaxation. So if somebody wanted to use it that way, they could.
Very good. And not necessarily, again, associated with our patch, because we don't make medical claims or things like that. But in general, is there effect of carnosine on telomere lengthening? Are there any studies linking those two things together?
So we haven't studied, what I would say is that we've done research on not a product that we don't sell on lengthening telomeres. And the reason why we don't sell it is because the FDA would probably regulate it as a drug. And that means we would have to take it through the drug process. So we elected not to do that. But we did, in fact, do 2 studies with Dr. Norm Shealy. And a big thank you to Dr. Shealy. It's just been absolutely wonderful and a privilege to work with him for so many years. We did, in fact, do 2 studies where we did show that there was a way to lengthen telomeres with light. So we may come out with that at some point. Now, telomere lengthening, preservation of telomeres, is an incredibly important part of solving the problem of human aging, but it's certainly not the only component. There's several other components. And when people come to the event in October, they're going to hear more to that story. But that certainly has been an area of interest of ours. We have studied it, and we have found some solutions using light to lengthen telomeres.
Very good. There's an individual asking, is there anything around, can they wear 2 Y-Age patches at the same time, not wear 2 Y-Age patches at the same time? It would mean glutathione, carnosine, or Eon.
We did a study with 2 medical doctors in Australia. We're actually in that study. Individuals were using glutathione, carnosine, and Eon at the same time, and they actually found a beneficial effect on the health. So we don't see any evidence that you couldn't do it. And in fact, using glutathione, carnosine, or carnosine Eon together should be perfectly fine.
Very good. So I think you talked a little about this, but in some cases, a supplement of carnosine might cause gastrointestinal discomfort, bloating, gas, those things. Have you seen any of that in the studies with the carnosine patch?
Actually, I was referring to baking soda. So you also see these effects with some amino acids. So for example, the amino acid ornithine, the amino acid arginine, if you take too much of that, like let's say doses of 5 grams, that can cause very severe gastrointestinal issues. Let people figure out what that is. But with beta-alanine, the issue is more of a flushing of the skin. And this would occur, let's say, with dosing of maybe 800 to 1,000 milligrams. It doesn't affect everyone, but it will affect some people. So that's why I'd recommend starting maybe with 500 milligrams. And if someone tolerates that well, then they could move on to a higher dose.
Very good.
Yep.
Now, in some of the instructions for use, it talks about wearing carnosine, 1 to 3 days per week. Is there a particular reason on that? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Well, when we came out with the carnosine patch, we didn't have a broad line of products. So we would, in our studies, look at the use of the carnosine patch 5 to 7 days per week. Now, glutathione has a very short half-life. It's of about 7 minutes. So that means if someone were to get an IV of glutathione, that glutathione goes in and out of the body in about an hour. With carnosine, it tends to stay in the body longer. So we recommended that if people were not exercising, maybe 3 days, 5 days a week is fine. If you're exercising, maybe a little bit more often. But now, because we have the X39 patch, which shows some of the similar benefits to carnosine, although very clearly different, that we'd recommend that if people are using X39, maybe they don't need to use carnosine as often. So this is something for individuals to experiment with. We currently don't have a study comparing X39 to carnosine. It's one of those things that's on. It really depends on a person's circumstances. For overall health, you don't really need to go crazy with these things. So my typical protocol, as an example, would be X39 behind the neck, X49 below the belly button, and then a set of energy patches, which I move to different locations on the body. That would be very typical for me. And then I'm always experimenting with different patches for use in the evening, although Eon is mostly my go-to. So you don't have to, you don't have to have 10 patches on your body. It's not necessary, don't complicate it. And you don't need to use multiple patches of the same product most of the time. One X